What is a cyber claims specialist? In this video, you're going to learn about the cyber claims specialist role in the cybersecurity world. So this is a support role in cybersecurity. So you'll learn an overview of the role, some different job titles, job responsibilities, salary, some tools you might use, as well as any certifications or a college education that you might need to actually do this job. So what is a cyber claims specialist? Essentially, you're going to work for an insurance company or like an insurance brokerage service. And essentially, you're the person responsible for handling cyber insurance claims. So as companies might get a data breach, you're the individual that actually focus on processing or helping to process that claim. Now, your overarching goal is really to help those policyholders navigate the claims process. So you might be working with like their attorneys or other individuals to kind of work through that process. You also help assess the damage caused by the whatever the incident was, whether it's internal, external, whether it's intentional, unintentional, etc. You're going to focus on determining based on the policy they have, like what's the coverage of the claim and any compensation that the policyholder is actually entitled to. Essentially, you're just like if you had an automobile and you got in a car accident, there's going to be that claims adjuster that comes out and says, okay, your car is totally damaged, or maybe it's just we need to fix this bumper or something like that. So that's what your role is going to be, but it's going to be at a bigger scale because cyber insurance policies typically pay out a lot more, and it's also going to be for cybersecurity specifically. So just keep that in mind. Now, other job titles you might see this listed as a cyber claims adjuster, liability claims specialist, insurance claims analyst, claims specialist, cybersecurity claims coordinator, or cybersecurity loss control specialist. And like usual, below this video in the description, I'll list a whole listing of potential job titles for you. So definitely check those out and search around on social media. Like I said, this is a support role, and a lot of people don't realize these different support roles in the cybersecurity world. So if you think of it like a military special forces unit, yes, there's the group of people that go like kick in doors and get the bad guys, but there's also a group of people that have to make sure they get fed, that make sure they have health care, that make sure all the vehicles are working. So they have all these different support elements. In the same way, these different cybersecurity support roles are helping to support the overall cybersecurity teams or cybersecurity posture and security posture of the organizations that you'll be working with. So this is another really good hidden role that a lot of people don't think about, but there's a pretty big demand right now for people in this particular role. So let's talk about some of those job responsibilities real quick. Well, essentially, you're going to be that person, like I said, that's going to be evaluating the different cybersecurity claims. You're going to assess any damage from the incident. You're going to be looking really deep at those policies, working again with legal and other teams to identify any coverage amounts. And this is critical because a lot of companies think they have so much coverage. Like let's say they buy a $5 million policy. So they think that they're covered for $5 million for, whatever cyber incident. The reality is most of these policies, no, right? You're only covered, depending on an incident, let's say a phishing attack, you might only be covered for $100,000 in losses as an organization. So you're probably going to deal with some really pissed off people that think they've got a $5 million coverage and they think they're okay. And really you've got to break the bad news to them that, hey, your policy only says you get $100,000 for this. So just keep that in mind that this particular role, you might get some hate mail, but just follow whatever your company's procedures are. You'll show the coverage amounts. There's obviously going to be contract in place. You'll probably be trained by your company on certain ways to say things by the legal team to make sure that you don't open the organization up to exposure for litigation. So you'll also be, not to scare you off, but just to be in mind that you'll be working a lot with legal in this type of role usually. Compensation-wise, you'll be making sure that you're, based on the policy that they have, you'll be determining, okay, you get, say the $100,000, you get to $5 million or whatever it is. As part of that, you're going to be also focused around the compliance side of things. So basically ensuring, because it's insurance, right? So ensuring that there's compliance with any regulations. So as you do the claims handling process, you've got to maintain a certain security of data. You got to maintain a certain process that you do to match regulations around things like data privacy, as well as breach notification laws. So just keep all that in mind, that you don't have to learn all this day one, but this would be some of the stuff that you'd be doing in this particular role. Well, what about salary? And surprisingly enough, this support role actually pays better than a lot of the more technical roles in cybersecurity, especially when you're starting out. So typically you're going to be around the $70,000 to $75,000 a year range. Might be a little less if you have no insurance background whatsoever, but you still make a decent wage around what a SOC Tier 1 analyst or a junior pen tester might make. So without you having to compete against everybody else, you could go get a cyber insurance job making the same amount. It's not technical, but you'll get exposure to a lot of different companies. You'll build relationships with a lot of hiring managers. And 6 months, a year later, when you're ready to make that switch, it's a lot easier to call up, Sally or Phil or somebody because you know them versus you trying to apply on job boards like everybody else. So I highly would recommend that. So 70,000 to 100 grand or more here in the US, 35 to 60,000 pounds, or in India, 500,000 to 1.5 million rupees. So what about some common tools? Like, what are you going to actually be using in this job? Are you going to be hacking things? Well, no. You will be using things like claims management software. So that's just used to kind of manage the claims and track them throughout the claims process, from the initial intake of, hey, we got a cyber breach, to the actual settlement of the claim. You're working with CRM software. So again, that's customer relationship management. For anyone that's already watched the sales professional video, then you already know what that is. But CRM is basically allowed to track everything in the pipeline. So tracking potential leads, opportunities, and basically that just helps you manage the pipeline of claims as well. You'll be using different types of assessment analysis tools, so like security scorecards, for example. And if you haven't watched the previous video on sales professional role, then security scorecards are basically, there's a number of companies that do them, and essentially they just assess the external security posture of an organization. So they do that through like threat intel, they do that through dark web, monitoring dark web, which is wrapped in the threat intel. They do it through analyzing companies for vulnerabilities, externally facing vulnerabilities. Specifically, they look on Shodan as well to see if they got vulnerable devices or servers out there. And so they take that data, they aggregate it, they produce a scorecard. And cyber insurers actually use those scorecards to determine how much is your policy going to be, your premium of your policy, how much coverage are going to actually get, or are we even going to cover you? Because I've done some trainings in the past with companies that couldn't get covered until we did the training with them, and then they were able to show an improvement in the security posture. So as more breaches happen, especially with supply chain breaches, these cyber insurers, and we're seeing it right now while I'm filming this video in 2023, we're seeing it that it's harder to get policies, harder to get higher coverage, and its insurance premiums have gone up about 30 to 40% in just the past year alone. So you're so critical to the process in this that I can't stress it enough that you really may want to look at this particular job as your starting point if you're brand new to the cyber world. And then, of course, another thing you'll be using is document management systems. So as the name implies, it's just used to manage and store claim-related documents. So things like police reports, if they're needed. So like if a company had a breach and they had to report it to federal law enforcement or local law enforcement, any statements from potential witnesses, any other evidence, etc. So that could be like forensic data that they're gathering as part of the incident response process. What about certifications and college degrees and all this stuff? You don't need a college degree. You don't need certifications. You can actually just go get this job. Now, I will say that typically based on here in the U.S., you will need, I believe, a claims adjuster license. I think that's what it's called. But there's like online courses, depending on the state you're in, usually a couple $100. You can take that and you can go get that license it is. And I think you can usually get it in most states. Once you get one, you can like apply for others in other states. And that's usually all you need to start out. These other certs I've got listed here, these typically require an investment. I think at least one of them, I believe, is like $2,000 or something like that. So these are ones that I would say once you've got the job, try to see if your company will actually pay for these versus you trying to pay out of pocket. But the certified insurance counselor, this is basically just used to demonstrate expertise in best practices in the insurance industry. The CPCU is a chartered property casualty underwriter. Again, that demonstrates expertise, but specifically in the property and casualty insurance area. The certified cybersecurity claims specialist, this one is designed to demonstrate knowledge of cyber insurance claims management. So whereas the first two are kind of more general insurance industry ones, this third one is specific for cyber. And same with this last one, the certified cyber insurance specialist. This one's accredited by the Chartered Insurance Institute. This last one's actually a very popular one that I've seen a lot of people getting that are working in this particular role. But again, this is actually the one that's like $2,000. I think the others are around the same. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have the budget for that, you don't need a cert. Try to get that company that you get a job at to try to actually pay for this for you. So key takeaways of this video. Number one, you'll be working with claims. That's pretty much your job as a cyber claims specialist. You're going to be working with claims from start to finish. You don't need a college degree. This is a non-technical role. And in fact, you don't even need to really understand terminology. It's going to be helpful for you, but you don't need to worry about like any Security Plus or any of those certs at all, just because you're focused on the actual claims. So it's very, very hands-off in that regard. Like you're just focused on the claims, the documentation, and asking for any evidence that you need to process the claims.